when President Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States, publicly hints that Ilhan Omar may soon face expulsion after renewed controversy surrounding her past marriage scandal. Omar fires back with rage. But moments later, Trump unleashes a shocking, razor-sharp comeback that flips the entire narrative, leaves audiences stunned, and forces Omar into complete silence. This video breaks down the explosive clash, the backstage reactions, and why Trump's final line is now dominating headlines across America.
The sun had barely risen over Washington when something strange settled over the city. A heavy silence. The kind that makes people look at their phones twice because something big must be happening. Reporters were still wiping sleep from their eyes when President Donald J. Trump, the 45th and now 47th President of the United States, stepped out for a quick press stop on the South Lawn. It was supposed to be a brief moment, a simple comment before he boarded Marine One. But nothing about this morning would stay simple. Trump paused, looked at the cameras, and said in his unmistakable voice, "A lot of people are talking about Ilhan Omar again, and let's just say things are coming out. Very bad things. She may be facing something serious sooner than she thinks." That was it. One sentence, one hint. But it hit Washington like an earthquake. Within minutes, social media exploded. Hashtags, reactions, frantic clips. Cable news anchors abandoned their earlier topics and leaned forward in their chairs. Staffers inside the Capitol started whispering, "Is this about the marriage thing again? Is he serious this time?" Everyone felt that familiar tension, the kind that only appears when Trump says something that shakes the ground under every politician's feet. Across town, Ilhan Omar was in her office when an aide rushed in, breathless, holding an iPad. He said it again, about the marriage scandal. Omar's face changed instantly, a flash of anger, a deeper flash of fear. She slammed the device on her desk and shot up to her feet. "He's obsessed with me. This is harassment. This is dangerous." But beneath her anger, staffers saw something else. Worry. Real worry. Because she knew Trump's words hit millions, instantly. And this time, he didn't sound like he was joking. He sounded like a man who meant every syllable.
Minutes later, Omar stormed into the hallway, filled with cameras, reporters, and microphones all pointed at her like arrows. Her voice trembled with rage. "Donald Trump is a racist. He is threatening me again. He is spreading lies. This is beneath the dignity of a president." But the more she shouted, the more the hallway fell into an uneasy quiet. She wasn't calm. She wasn't confident. She looked shaken, like someone who had been pushed against a truth she didn't want to face. Meanwhile, back at the White House, Trump stood by the door of Marine One. His staff watched him carefully. He wasn't angry. He wasn't loud. He was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm you see right before lightning hits the ground. He looked back at the reporters and said softly, "You'll hear more later, I promise." That promise would change everything. Nobody knew that in just a few hours, Trump would unleash a comeback so sharp, so stunning, so explosive that it would silence Ilhan Omar completely and leave America talking for weeks. The moment Ilhan Omar finished her angry hallway statement, Washington felt like it was spinning. Reporters were shouting questions, cameras were flashing, and staffers scrambled like the building was on fire. But behind all that noise, there was something deeper, something heavier.
an emotion nobody could quite describe. It felt like a storm building inside the walls of Congress. Omar's voice had cracked when she yelled about Trump's comments. People noticed. Even the reporters who usually defended her looked uneasy. She wiped her forehead, shook her head, and tried to regain control. But it wasn't working. Her hands trembled slightly, and she kept glancing at her phone as if expecting something terrifying. Inside her office, her team rushed to contain the explosion. A young staffer whispered, "Congresswoman, the press is calling non-stop. They want you back on air. MSNBC, CNN, even BBC." Omar snapped, "No, no more until I see exactly what he said." Her aide hesitated. "It's going viral. Millions of views already." That only made her angrier. She grabbed the remote and slammed it on the desk, flipping through channels showing the same scene. Trump on the South Lawn, calm, confident, almost gentle as he said that one line about her facing consequences. A straight shot, calm, controlled, devastating. Omar clenched her jaw. He wants to destroy me. He thinks he can intimidate me like I'm some weak woman. But deep down, that wasn't what bothered her most. It was the truth he might expose next.
Meanwhile, in the West Wing, the energy was the complete opposite. Trump had returned from Marine One and stepped into the Oval Office with the same quiet confidence he'd shown all morning. Staffers who had worked with him for years said they hadn't seen that look on his face in a long time. The look of a man holding back something powerful, something sharp, something timed perfectly. His advisors gathered around. One of them said, "Sir, her reaction was—" "I know," Trump interrupted with a small smile. "She panicked." He walked to the Resolute desk, picked up a printed copy of his Truth Social post, the one with nearly 3 million likes in minutes, and tapped the paper lightly with his finger. "You see this?" he said. "The American people know what's going on. They're not stupid. They've seen her story for years. They know the facts better than the media does." Another advisor said quietly, "Sir, she's furious. She's calling your comment racist, dangerous." Trump shook his head slowly. "It's not racist to tell the truth, and it's not dangerous to enforce the law." He leaned back and whispered something that made his staff stand still. "She thinks what I said earlier was the hammer, but she hasn't seen the hammer yet."
At that exact moment, across the city, Omar was pacing back and forth, her breathing shallow, reporters swarming outside her door, and her team desperately trying to calm her. But there was no calming her, because she knew Trump wasn't done. He was just getting started. The air in Washington grew heavier as noon approached. It felt like everyone, from janitors sweeping Capitol floors to senior lawmakers in private elevators, was waiting for something. Even though Trump had said only a few words earlier that morning, those words had cracked open a door people weren't ready to look through. Inside the Capitol, Ilhan Omar's office felt like a pressure cooker. Her staff whispered in corners, anxiously checking their phones. Her communications director was pacing so hard, the carpet fibers were beginning to flatten. Omar, however, was seated at her desk, completely still, staring at the paused clip of Trump on her screen. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't angry. He was calm. And that calmness, it frightened her more than any insult he'd ever thrown. "He's planning something," she muttered under her breath. "I know that tone. I know how he works." A staffer, voice trembling, asked, Should we release a stronger statement? Maybe call a press conference? Omar exploded. No, not yet. If I speak now, I look desperate. The room went silent. The staff exchanged worried glances. She did look desperate already. Her hands trembled as she tried to steady herself. She pressed her palms against her forehead, whispering, "Why today? Why now? Why bring this up again?"
Across town, the mood couldn't have been more different. In the West Wing, people moved quickly but calmly, almost like they were preparing for something expected, a storm they saw coming hours before the rest of the country. Trump was in the Oval Office with senior aides, reviewing the reactions to Omar's earlier outburst. One advisor stepped forward. "Sir, Omar's clip is trending at the top on every platform. Her reaction looks unhinged?" Trump didn't look up. He kept reading. He enjoyed studying the details slowly, letting the truth sink into him before speaking. Finally, he placed the paper down and said, "You know what her problem is? She's afraid of facts. Facts don't go away just because she screams." He stood, straightened his suit jacket, and walked toward the tall window overlooking the south lawn. His reflection in the glass showed a man who had gone through years of battles, attacks, lies, and storms, but came out stronger each time. He whispered, almost to himself, "The American people deserve honesty, and I'm going to give it to them." Then he turned, looked directly at his aides, and said in a firm, steady voice, "Schedule a press statement outside in 1 hour." 1 hour. That single announcement sent tremors through the entire building. Outside, reporters waiting in the chilly air immediately sensed something was coming. They rushed to set up new lights, adjust microphones, and position themselves as close as they could before security told them to back up.
Back at Omar's office, her phone buzzed with alerts. Breaking: Trump will speak again. White House confirms. Her face drained of color. "He's going to hit back," she whispered. And for the first time since the controversy began, she looked genuinely afraid. By early afternoon, the White House press line looked like a battlefield. Reporters were elbowing each other, adjusting microphones, tightening cables, and whispering into their phones as they waited for one man, Donald J. Trump, the 45th and 47th President of the United States. The wind was blowing sharply, jackets flapped, papers flew, but nobody moved from their spot, because they all sensed the same thing. Something historic was about to happen. Camera crews whispered nervously, "Why did he call this statement so suddenly? Why is Omar so quiet now? Did Trump find something new?" Nobody had answers.
Inside the White House, Trump was moving down the hallway with a calmness that didn't match the chaos outside. He walked slowly, hands behind his back, surrounded by Secret Service, staffers stepping aside, murmuring respectfully as he passed. He wasn't nervous, he wasn't rattled. He carried the confidence of a man who had spent his entire life fighting storms and winning them. An aide approached. "Sir, everything is set. The press is waiting." Trump nodded once. "Good." He paused at the doorway, looking out at the crowded press area. His face remained unreadable. Then quietly, he said, "They think I'm going to back down. They really don't understand me." Meanwhile, across the city, Ilhan Omar stood at the window of her office on Capitol Hill. Her arms were crossed tightly against her chest. Her face looked pale, drained of its usual fire. Her phone sat on the table beside her, buzzing non-stop with calls she refused to answer. Her chief of staff walked in timidly.
They just announced it officially. The president is speaking in minutes. Omar didn't turn around. She didn't blink. She just whispered, "He's doing this on purpose. He wants me to panic." Her chief of staff didn't respond. The truth was obvious. She was panicking. She finally turned, her eyes full of something her staff had never seen: fear. "Do you think he knows something? Something we didn't prepare for?" Her chief of staff tried to give a reassuring smile, but it trembled. "Congresswoman, I honestly don't know."
Back at the White House, the Marine Band had just finished warming up nearby, their instruments echoing faintly across the lawn as the podium was adjusted. Secret Service agents lined the perimeter, scanning the crowd. Then someone shouted, "He's coming!" Boom! Mics shot into the air. Cameras lit up. The energy felt electric, like the air right before lightning struck. Trump stepped out onto the path with the slow, steady stride of someone who knew exactly what he was about to say and how explosive it would be. Reporters leaned forward in unison. But before speaking, Trump turned slightly, glanced at the massive crowd of journalists, and gave a small, almost amused smile. It was the smile of a man holding the truth like a loaded cannon. Across Washington, Ilhan Omar felt her knees weaken. She knew this wasn't just a press statement. This was the moment Trump would flip the entire narrative. And she couldn't do anything but wait.
The moment Trump stepped toward the podium, the entire press area fell into a silence so sharp it felt like it could cut through steel. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if nature itself was waiting for what the 47th President of the United States was about to say. Trump adjusted the microphone gently, his expression calm but powerful. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned so far forward they were almost tipping over their equipment. Everyone expected anger, fire, maybe even shouting. But instead, Trump spoke in a low, steady voice. "Before we begin, I want to remind everyone watching, this is about the truth, nothing more." That alone sent chills down the spine of every journalist present. Across Washington, in Omar's office, those words hit her like a punch. She froze, staring at the television. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it echoing in her ears. Back at the White House, Trump continued, "You've all seen Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's meltdown this morning, screaming racism, screaming Islamophobia, screaming that she's being threatened." He paused, looking slowly across the sea of cameras. But she didn't scream about the facts. There it was, the shift, the beginning of the hammer he promised. Trump raised the sheet of paper, not waving it, not shaking it, just holding it with absolute confidence. This is what set her off. The truth, the facts that the American people already know, the facts she never answers, the facts she runs from. He lowered the paper slightly. Ilhan Omar married Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi. That's not news. But what is interesting is that for over a decade, she has refused to provide any document proving he is not her brother.
A ripple of shock moved through the reporters. Cameras zoomed even closer. Trump continued, his voice firm but calm, almost fatherly. "Americans follow the law. Millions of immigrants come here legally, do the paperwork, pay the fees, tell the truth. They love this country. They respect it." He looked directly into the cameras. "And when someone cheats the system, lies on federal forms, files fraudulent tax returns, and then calls you racist for asking questions, That person is not above the law." Inside Omar's office, her legs weakened. She sat down slowly, gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her staff looked terrified. Nobody dared speak. Back at the White House, Trump leaned slightly closer to the microphone, his tone soft but cutting. "She can scream all day long, but screaming won't change the truth, and screaming won't stop accountability." Reporter hands shot up instantly, but Trump raised one finger, signaling he wasn't finished. "And for anyone wondering, this isn't about politics. This is about protecting our country from fraud and corruption. This is about America first." A few gasps slipped through the crowd. Trump wasn't yelling. Trump wasn't joking. Trump wasn't attacking. He was exposing. And everyone knew this was only the beginning.
The air outside the White House grew colder, sharper, as if the sky itself sensed the weight of what Trump was about to reveal. Every camera, every microphone, every reporter stood frozen, waiting. Trump placed the paper down gently on the podium and rested both hands on the sides. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It wasn't theatrical. It was the posture of a leader fully certain of the truth he carried. He continued, his voice steady. "While Congresswoman Omar was screaming on CNN, calling me every name in the book, she forgot to mention something very important." He paused, long enough for reporters to lean even closer. She forgot to mention the documents she signed. She forgot to mention the dates. She forgot to mention the forms she filled, under penalty of perjury. A murmur spread through the press line, like a wave of electricity. Inside Omar's office, her staff stared at the TV in horror. Omar's hands clutched the edge of her desk. She shook her head slowly, whispering, No, he's not going to read them. He wouldn't dare." But he would. And he did. Back at the podium, Trump pulled out a second paper, cleaner, whiter, more official looking. "This is a publicly available document. Anyone can look at it. This is the marriage certificate Ilhan Omar signed with Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi in 2002. Same rare middle name, same father's name, and according to multiple sources, same exact family background." He held the document still, not waving it, almost respectfully. "These are not accusations. These are records." The press line went completely silent. He continued, "And here is where it gets interesting. In 2014 and 2015, during the years when she was still legally married to Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi, she filed joint tax returns with another man." Reporters gasped audibly. One dropped their pen, another covered their mouth. In America, filing joint tax returns while married to someone else is illegal. It's fraud. Every American knows this. Every honest immigrant knows this. It's simple.
Then Trump leaned in slightly and lowered his voice, making the words land even harder. "I have never once asked to see her passport. I have never asked for her birth certificate. I have asked for nothing from her. But she has refused for years to provide any proof that the man she married is not her brother." He let the silence settle again. Not a bird chirped. Not a microphone buzzed. The world felt like it had stopped spinning. And when someone refuses to prove their innocence, Trump said quietly, it usually means they're hiding guilt. Inside Omar's office, her breathing became unsteady. Tears actually welled in her eyes. She tried to wipe them before her staff saw, but they did. They saw everything. The fear, the panic, the realization that Trump was controlling the narrative completely. Trump finished the segment with a calm, devastating line. "I am not threatening her. I am reminding America of the truth, a truth she cannot outrun." A reporter tried to shout a question, but no words could overcome the silence that followed, because everyone knew Trump had just flipped the entire story, and Omar had no answer.
For several seconds after Trump's final line, it felt like the entire world forgot how to breathe. The cameras were rolling, but even the reporters behind them couldn't speak. They stared at the president as though they had just witnessed the ground split open beneath their feet. Trump didn't rush. He didn't smirk. He simply stood there, completely composed, hands resting lightly on the podium, the posture of a man who had delivered truth without fear. Then, slowly, he looked up again and said, "I'm not here to fight her. I'm here to fight for the American people, the good, honest people who follow the law, who love this country, and who deserve leaders who tell the truth." That line sent a shockwave through the entire press corps. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was something deeper. Moral clarity. Inside her office, Ilhan Omar felt like she had been crushed under the weight of those words. They struck at the one place she couldn't defend, the truth she had avoided for years. Her staff exchanged glances, terrified to speak. Finally, her chief of staff whispered, "Congresswoman, you need to respond." Omar didn't answer. She was staring at the TV, eyes glassy, lips trembling. The truth wasn't just being spoken, it was being broadcast live to millions, and Trump wasn't yelling. That made it even worse. He was calm, too calm, and calmness made his words cut deeper than any insult ever could.
Back at the White House, a reporter finally found the courage to speak. "Mr. President, are you suggesting Congresswoman Omar should be removed from Congress or deported?" Trump looked at her, and the crowd leaned forward. "I'm saying," Trump replied, "that America is a nation of laws, and when someone breaks the law, whether they're a farmer, a teacher, a truck driver, or a member of Congress, there are consequences. No attack, no insult, just law and principle." He continued, "If she is innocent, all she has to do is show the documents she has refused to show for more than 10 years. Birth certificates, passports, family records, anything. But for some reason, she hasn't, and the American people deserve to know why." A murmur ran through the crowd. Even some journalists who traditionally opposed Trump looked conflicted. Something in his tone, the measured seriousness, was undeniable. Inside the Capitol, Omar finally broke her silence. "He's lying," she whispered, but her voice cracked. "He's twisting everything. He's attacking me." But she didn't sound angry anymore. She sounded defeated. Her staff saw her shoulders collapse, her confidence evaporate, and her eyes fill with panic. This wasn't political pressure. This was truth, closing in, inch by inch.
Meanwhile, Trump took a small step back from the podium, signaling the beginning of the end of his statement. But before leaving, he delivered a final line, a line that would explode across the internet within minutes. "When leaders lie, America crumbles. When leaders tell the truth, America stands tall."
Today, I'm standing for America. Reporters froze. Omar's heart stopped. The nation held its breath. Trump turned and walked away, calm, steady, unshaken, leaving Washington in an emotional earthquake that would not settle anytime soon.
While reporters scrambled outside the White House lawn, trying to digest Trump's earth-shaking final line, the scene inside Capitol Hill turned into pure chaos. Phones rang nonstop. Aides whispered frantically. Journalists camped outside Ilhan Omar's office, waiting for any sign of reaction. The tension was so thick, it felt suffocating. Inside her office, however, Ilhan Omar sat in complete stillness. Not angry, not shouting, not pacing, just still. The TV replayed Trump's words again and again. When leaders lie, America crumbles. When leaders tell the truth, America stands tall. Today, I'm standing for America. Each repetition felt like a hammer falling on her chest. Her eyes were locked on the screen, but her mind was spiraling. She couldn't even hear her staff at first. "Congresswoman, Omar, ma'am, you need to respond. The media is waiting. Everyone is waiting." She finally blinked, slowly turning toward them. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "What? What do I even say to that?" No one answered, because they didn't know either. One aide, voice trembling, said, "We could call it racist again?" Ilhan Omar slammed her palm on the desk, not out of rage this time, but fear. "No, that won't work this time. Not after he said it calmly like that. Not after he showed documents." Her staff looked at each other with a collective dread, the same realization haunting them all. Trump hadn't screamed. He hadn't mocked. He had delivered facts with a calmness that made them cut 10 times deeper.
Across the city, the atmosphere inside the White House was the complete opposite. Staffers moved with controlled confidence, like a team that had just executed a perfect play. Advisors replayed the footage of Trump at the podium, analyzing it, appreciating the precision, the tone, the timing. One senior advisor said quietly, "Sir, that final line is everywhere. News networks can't stop playing it." Trump nodded, almost casually, as he removed his overcoat and handed it to a Secret Service agent. "It was the truth," he said. "Truth doesn't need shouting." Another advisor added, "She looks shaken, sir. Her team is scrambling." Trump didn't gloat. He simply poured himself a glass of water, took a sip, and set it down gently. "Of course they're scrambling. They've lived off lies for years. Truth makes people like that panic." He sat down at the resolute desk, hands folded, posture strong but relaxed. Around him, aides watched quietly, admiring how calm he remained in a political storm that would have destroyed lesser men. Trump leaned back and said softly, "They tried to say I threatened her. I didn't. I just told the truth, and the truth threatens them."
Meanwhile, in Omar's office, her staff attempted one last push. "Congresswoman, please, even a short statement. Reporters are already saying you've gone silent." Omar stood up abruptly, her legs unsteady, her voice cracking. "I cannot speak right now." She knew anything she said would look weak. Anything she said would sound defensive. Anything she said would crumble under Trump's calm truth. For the first time since entering Congress, she felt completely powerless. And Trump hadn't even raised his voice. As the footage of Trump's speech dominated every major network, every social platform, every political conversation, Ilhan Omar's office remained unnervingly quiet. The hallway outside was filled with reporters shouting her name, begging for comment. But inside the office itself, there was only one sound: her shallow, shaky breathing. Her staff stood frozen in place. They had never seen her like this, trembling, overwhelmed, eyes darting across the room as if she were trying to find an escape door in a building with none. The TV played Trump's closing line on repeat, and each time it echoed, her shoulders tightened. When leaders lie, America crumbles. When leaders tell the truth, America stands tall. Today, I'm standing for America. The words felt like they were aimed straight at her soul. "He's destroying me," Omar whispered, almost to herself. Her chief of staff approached cautiously. "Congresswoman, you need to get ahead of this. You need to say something." But she suddenly snapped. "What do you want me to say? That he's wrong? He has documents. He has dates. He didn't yell. He didn't attack. He exposed." Her voice broke mid-sentence, not from anger, from fear. Her staff exchanged pained glances. Some of them had worked for years on helping her craft careful public responses. But today, nothing was working. Every line they drafted sounded hollow. Every defense sounded weak. Every attempt to spin it back at Trump sounded like a lie.
Meanwhile, inside the White House, the mood was entirely different. Staffers moved through the West Wing with a sense of quiet pride. From the communications office to the security corridors, people whispered to one another. "He crushed the narrative. She can't recover from that. He just told the truth calmly. That's what hit hardest." In the Oval Office, Trump was sitting with two senior advisors. They briefed him on social media trends, the cable news reactions, and the sudden panic happening inside Omar's circle. One advisor said, "Sir, she hasn't spoken, not a single word. Her office hasn't put out any statement." Trump nodded, almost solemnly. "Because there's nothing to say. You can't argue with facts, not when the American people are watching." The advisor added, "CNN tried to defend her, but even their analysts look uncomfortable." Another advisor leaned in. "Sir, whatever you said out there, it hit something deep." Trump sighed, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "America deserves truth," he said quietly. "People are tired of lies, tired of fraud, tired of being insulted for asking questions." He looked toward the window where the press area was still buzzing. "Truth is powerful. You don't need to scream it. You just stand by it."
Back at the Capitol, Omar finally stood up, gripping her desk for balance. "Fine," she said weakly. We'll make a statement." Her staff waited. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Not a word. Her throat tightened. Her eyes watered, against her will. She shook her head and whispered, I can't. Not right now." For the first time in her political career, Ilhan Omar, a woman known for fierce attacks and fiery speeches, was struck completely mute. And all across America, headlines exploded. Omar silent after Trump's devastating statement. President's calm truth shakes Washington. Trump hadn't just flipped the narrative, he had erased hers entirely.
Washington felt strangely hollow in the moments after Ilhan Omar fell into silence. It was as if the entire city, from the Capitol steps to the White House gates, had paused to absorb what had just happened. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the marble buildings, giving the day an almost cinematic ending, one that nobody expected.
Inside Omar's office, the atmosphere had turned painfully heavy. Her staff hovered near the corners of the room, unsure whether to stay, leave, or comfort her. Her eyes were red, her posture slouched, her usual bold confidence shattered. For the first time in her political life, she had no words. She whispered to herself, as if trying to understand what had happened. He didn't yell. He didn't insult me. He didn't twist anything. He just told the truth. A tear slipped from her eye. She wiped it quickly, but her staff saw it. They exchanged heartbroken looks, not because they pitied her politics, but because they had never seen her so human, so vulnerable, so defeated. Her chief of staff approached gently. "Congresswoman, the networks are requesting response, all of them." Omar closed her eyes. She inhaled shakily, exhaled slowly, and whispered, "Tell them no comment." Those 3 words, simple but devastating, traveled across Washington like wildfire.
Across the city, inside the White House, Trump sat in the Oval Office, the quiet evening light reflecting off the resolute desk. His senior aides finished their briefing, but Trump stared at nothing in particular, deep in thought, calm, composed. One advisor said, "Sir, the news is everywhere. Omar refused to respond. She told every network no comment." Another added, "Your final line is now the top headline nationwide, sir. People are calling it one of the most powerful statements of your presidency." Trump leaned back, interlocking his fingers. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply nodded, as though this moment wasn't about victory, but principle. "The truth," he said softly, "always stands. Lies collapse. Always." He stood and walked toward the window, looking out at Washington as the sky turned orange and purple. "It was never about attacking her," he continued. "It was about showing people what leadership looks like. Real leadership. Leadership that protects America." His voice carried warmth, strength, the tone of a man who had no regrets, no doubts, and no fear.
Meanwhile, millions of Americans sat glued to their televisions, re-watching his speech, replaying his final line, and finding something emotional in the calmness of his delivery. Older citizens wiped their eyes. Veterans nodded firmly. Families whispered to one another, "That's our president. That's leadership." And though he didn't hear them, he felt it. The energy of a nation that believed in him, trusted him, and stood with him. Reporters gathered outside the White House once more, hoping for a closing comment. And just before Marine One lifted off for the evening, Trump offered a final, gentle wave. Calm, confident, unshaken. America knew then, this moment would live forever.
My friends, if this story moved you, if it shook you, if it reminded you what real leadership looks like, then don't leave without showing love. Hit that like button so this message spreads. Drop a comment to tell me what part hit you the hardest. Your words keep this channel alive. Subscribe right now so you never miss stories that build courage and sharpen your mind.